Hello everybody, and welcome to Gwen's Bookish Ramblings. I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes, and today, you might guess by the picture, we're going to be talking about Barbie. Well, sort of. You see, when I was about, let's say 14, my father had purchased a book and left it out, and I picked it up, intrigued, and read all the way through it and discovered after I'd finished reading it that it was supposed to be a Christmas present, and lo and behold, I had actually ruined his plans for a Christmas present. He was put out, and we now have this book in the house that he never intended to keep. So, it was a book about Barbie, and not just a book that, say, talked about how terrible Barbie was for girls, or how wonderful Barbie was for girls, or was just talking about how awesome Barbie was. It was officially this book, Forever Barbie, the Unauthorized Biography of a Real Doll by the journalist M.G. Lord, who is in fact a woman. And what was very, very interesting to me was that this book was tremendously even-handed in how it treated this doll, as in, at no point does she say Barbie is 100% terrible for girls and women, nor does she say Barbie is 100% wonderful. And as you read this book, it turns into a discussion about psychology of childhood education. It turns into a discussion about the psychology of women, the psychology behind anorexia and bulimia. It turns into a discussion about the history of the United States from the 1950s to what was then the present, that is 1994, when this book was officially published. And it is fascinating. It's fascinating to see how the people who first brought Mattel into existence, the keynote of which is one Ruth Handler, and her husband, how they viewed Barbie as compared to how other people in Mattel viewed Barbie, as compared to how people all over the United States, most particularly women, viewed Barbie. And among the most interesting things, of course, in this were some of the photographs, which I will not include in this simply because most of the photographs in this book are not, in fact, applicable to what I'll be talking about. And some of those photographs are a little bit disturbing. I leave it to you to read the book to find out which ones. So, of course, for me growing up, I didn't grow up in a house that was particularly polarized around the Barbie issue. My mother was never enamored of them, but to me, this was pretty much Barbie. I actually owned this particular dress, and I suspect this particular doll. Not that she ever looked that good. I was not particularly kind to my toys. But reading through this book, you begin to hear stories about people who did horrific things to their Barbies, girls who drew things on them in pen, and of course the eternal usage that they were put through by both boys and girls of ripping off limbs and sticking them onto other parts of the doll. But what's fascinating is that Barbie, for all the negative impact she has in terms of girls' self-image, about the unnatural size of her waist and the unnatural lifestyle she advocates and the way that she exists in this strange continuum that nobody could ever possibly aspire to. Simultaneously, Barbie is an oddly feminist, pro-feminist construct, because right from the start and to this day, Barbie has been a career woman. Right from the start, it's made very clear in this book that the Barbie we see from back in the day, this being the original Barbie, which, as you can see, is not in fact the same as the one that we have today. This Barbie, back in 1959, was working. And they, in fact, didn't invent a Ken for her until they were forced by demands from from outside of the company. Barbie doesn't have children. She doesn't have parents. She does have a younger sister, two younger sisters these days, but they seem to have sprung fully formed out of nowhere. She has a boyfriend, Ken. We all know who Ken is, except that Ken, we have to all agree, is a complete nonentity. He kind of appears when Barbie needs a date somewhere and then vanishes into the ether again. And in the meantime, what does Barbie do? She works as a fashion model. She works as a stewardess. She works as a nurse. She babysits sometimes, which I suppose is a job because she was marketed originally as being a teen fashion model. Come the 1980s, she worked as an astronaut, she worked as a doctor, and all of these various costumes and poses that Barbie put on, she leads a very, very independent life. And that actually goes in direct conflict with all of these negative images of Barbie as being some sort of a foolish example for young women about how to attract men, because while she certainly does seem to dress for boys a lot, nobody can ever genuinely lose the cultural impact of the Barbie dating game board game that was created decades ago. We never quite leave that behind for her, and we never quite leave behind tee-hee, math is hard, but we also need to remember that this is a woman who needs no man, because I recall from playing with Barbies myself, you'd sort of bring Ken in if you thought she needed a guy for something, and then you'd send him away. Because Ken has no real place in Barbie's world. I've actually watched some of those Barbie movies that they put out, these computer-generated horrors that are trying to pretend that they're Disney or DreamWorks or something, and they're really not. But you watch those movies, and while there are male leads in them, they're almost incidental, as though they're sort of required to be there. But they're not the point. And so Barbie is very, very conflicting as a figure, as an example, as something you give to young girls. And Mattel, as a company, yes, of course it's put out this Barbie who is supposed to be focused so hard on her appearance and interested in nothing more than clothes and dating and girly things. They put out the Barbie that said math is hard, and some terrible, terrible video games about finding and preparing yourself for dates because that's your sole purpose in life. But at the same time, they were in fact one of the first companies to put out a colored doll. They had a black friend for Barbie, and that friend first appeared at the end of the 1960s, Christy the doll. And they supported one of the earliest attempts to create a doll company, a toy company that was run by black Americans to produce black dolls for black children in order to give them dolls that were of them. Dolls that were not white middle class America, but were in fact black America. In the 1980s, they put out a Barbie doll that was officially going to be a black Barbie, not just Barbie's friend Christy, Barbie's cohort, Barbie's sidekick, that she was to carry the name of Barbie. And they put a lot of effort into her, as described in this book. At the same time, of course, they put out a Latina Barbie who was some of the most genuine stereotypes surrounding the Latino community, and was really something of a terrible PC error. And it's very, very conflicting, and this book goes through this. It goes through how every single layer of this, positive on one hand, Ruth Handler wanting to give little girls a doll that wasn't a baby doll, that wasn't a doll to encourage them to be nurturing mommies, but was to encourage them to look forward to being adults, not mothers, adults, to play with these dolls and imagine their lives as adults. Again, not mothers, not nurturers, not girlfriends, but as grown-up persons. And so you have that you have that impetus and that impulse, and at the same time, you have this doll who so clearly advocates focusing on nothing more than appearance. And I love this book for that. I love the way that you read this book, and it talks about how Barbie is so important and such a formative experience for so many women in North America, in the world, but in America in particular. And how we play with this doll as girls or boys, and how it affects us, and yet how when we're playing with this doll, it's not just the doll that affects us, it's the entire social milieu. It's how parents, how mothers affect their daughters, how fathers affect their daughters. She describes an incident in which she was watching some play testing. She had been invited to watch it, and there are 4 little girls playing, and 3 of them are sitting down playing with the Barbies. The 4th one is playing with horses off in the corner, and the 3rd one, when they try to put Barbie into the driver's seat of a car, becomes extremely irate, shrieking that her mother had said that men drive cars and girls don't drive cars. And everybody is taken aback by this, and the man who was running the playtesting turned to Ms. Lord and said, "And they blame us for this?" Because, of course, you can't blame an inanimate doll for what the mother tells the daughter. And so there's so much more complexity, social complexity, historical complexity, sociological and psychological complexity to what effect a Barbie doll has on a child, to what effect a Barbie doll has on adults, on how we view things. Because it's that old saw about whether art reflects reality or reality reflects art. Barbie is officially and legally, in a lot of ways, literally a work of art. And it is one that reflects how we view women and how we view the world, but also changes it. And these two things feed off each other in a way that this book deconstructs and takes apart and discusses. And I am not going into detail because these are long-winded, complex, intellectual arguments that you have to read the book to really follow through to the end. The concept of homeostatism, which she got from another psychologist, the concept of women dressing super feminine or men dressing hyper masculine in order to offset a part of themselves that is seen as otherwise, is a concept discussed in this. And this is a wonderful, wonderful book, and I think everybody should read it. Thanks for coming, and see you next time, I hope.